Hi guys, coming at you from my dining room, which will be the new Mrs. Meyer's art class for the next few weeks. So I thought we would go ahead and get started with a project that can be adapted for any age. It can be as hard or as easy as you want it to be. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a background, but first we're gonna pick an animal. So you can pick any animal out there that has some sort of patterned or textured coat or fur. So let me just give you some examples. So we've got a zebra. Okay, so if we were gonna make a background of a zebra, we would use black and white stripes. Okay, I've also got one kind of outside of the box here. This is an octopus, right? What do its tentacles look like? It has the little suction cups, so it's a pattern of circles. Okay, and here's the one that I'm gonna work on today, and I'm gonna show you as my example, but you can literally adapt this project to any animal that you wanted to pick. So I'm gonna do a giraffe, okay? So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna turn you around really fast, and I'm gonna give you kind of the idea of what you need as far as supplies to get this project going. All right, so you're gonna need some kind of paper. This kind of paper I have is watercolor paper. I have a gigantic pad here at my house that I do more of my commissioned work on, that I went ahead and cut up a few papers on just because we are getting low on our printer paper. And since we are staying home and not going out unless absolutely necessary, I'm just gonna use what I have here. But again, you can use any kind of paper. Just make sure it's white, okay? Because we're gonna add color to it. And the easiest way to add color is to white paper. You will also need crayons of some sort, pencils, watercolor, and these are those watercolors that we made last week out of our old markers. And then here, let me just show you what I had done. I had printed these out because we're gonna put these over the top of our background. But if you do not have the ability to print that out, here's what you can do. You can find any kind of device or an iPad, and you can, and I'll show you this later, but you can pull the picture up on there, and if you lay your paper over the top of it, it will act as a light box. So it will shine so bright, you'll be able to see the silhouette through. And as long as your fingers do not touch the screen, your pencil's the only thing touching it, you'll be able to trace that, and that will give you a template for your animal. Okay, here is what I have already started for my giraffe's background. I've started putting in some of the spots, and notice that none of them are perfectly square or circular. They are just all kinds of different shapes put in here together. So I'm gonna keep filling this the rest of the way in, and I'm gonna show you what we're gonna do next. Okay, so I'm gonna add probably a couple more shapes in here. And again, they don't have to be any particular shape. You just wanna put them in here and fill your background in nice and full. Might have one kind of coming in here and be a little bit oblong. Maybe we'll curve that a little less. Make it a little more like that. Okay, so now that we've finished our background, you are done with your pencil. And so what you're gonna do is you're gonna find whatever color will match with your animal. So since I'm doing a giraffe, I'm gonna use brown, and then I'm gonna use yellow watercolor over the top of that. So when you use a crayon and then use watercolor with it, wherever you have colored your crayon, your watercolor will not stick. So we're gonna go in here and color in all these little spots brown, and then we'll go back over it with yellow watercolor. I'm gonna do a time lapse to kind of show you what the process looks like, but not make you sit here forever to watch this happen. Okay, before we start painting, I want to kind of comment on a few things I did in the time lapse. You will notice that I used crayon everywhere, but I went and I colored it lightly, and then I went back and colored over it and made it a little darker. What we did here is called value. We made a value scale. We went from light to dark with our color just by simply adding layers. Okay, here's the thing. We're going to use the watercolor that I told you about that we made, but first we're going to check how bright it is, make sure it's the color we want. And two, even though we have colored with our crayon, because this isn't a crayon resist, so oil and water, they won't stick together, But in these places where you can see it's lighter, if you were to get watercolor there, it would stick just because there is white paper showing through. Now, it's usually not enough for you to really tell, but we are still going to try to stay outside of the lines of the spots. Okay, but first here, see, this is part of that watercolor paper I had that's a little bit torn up. So I'm going to just check my color and make sure it's what I'm looking for. So it's not quite as bright as I'd like for it to be if I were using traditional watercolor, but again, this was homemade and we're gonna roll with it because it's pretty good for being homemade. So I'm gonna set that to the side and we're gonna go ahead and paint this background. You're just gonna take your watercolor, dip your paintbrush. Remember, we go dip and then we swipe so we don't dribble it everywhere. And then you're just gonna paint this all the way in. If you want, after you've painted it in and you don't feel like it's dark enough, you can go back and put another color or put another coat on, excuse me. Woo! Once it's dry, it'll be ready to be painted again. And you don't have to if you're happy with it the way it is. But while this is drying, we are gonna move on to our next part of the project. Okay, so I'm gonna get this painted in here. I do wanna show you what it looks like if you were to paint over it. Look, if you painted over it, it really actually kind of gives it a cool effect. So it's not that big of a deal. So if you have younger ones and this is just going to prove to be too tedious for them, you are welcome to just tell them to paint the whole paper in. I am actually going to stop being quite so careful and I'm just going to paint and even paint over that part because I think it makes a really cool effect. I will likely go over this again once it's dried because I really want that yellow to stand out. I'm even gonna go over my crayons. Okay, notice how my paper is warping a little bit. That's very common, okay? Even though this is watercolor paper, it'll happen. As it dries, it will flatten back out just a little bit, and if it doesn't, you are welcome to put it underneath some books, and it will help flatten it. We've all got big, heavy books laying around, especially since our kids are, you know, schooling from home. Okay, I'm going back over this just to give it a little bit more, because on the top part of my paper, it had dried out pretty quick. Okay, well, that's not going to use very much of our watercolor, so we'll be able to do more projects with this later. Okay, all right, so I'm going to set this to the side, and I'm going to show you what we're going to do for our next part of the project. All right, so our next step, once we have painted our background and we've set it to the side, here's where it starts to vary in what you can do. You can either print off a picture that's in black and white and go in and practice those cutting skills and cut this out to where it looks something like this. That's what I did. I went ahead and already cut it out. If you don't have the ability to print something like that, I'm gonna give you two more options. So you can just get a black sheet of paper and set it to the side. Get just a normal sheet of paper, and you can grab your iPad with your image that you want on there. Now, if you don't touch this with your fingers, it will not move, okay? And this will act like a light box. So what you can do is set your paper over the top and make sure your hand is laying on the side of the iPad. And if you put your pencil down, you see how it gets even clearer. And what you can do is you can go in here and you can just trace around the animal. But again, you have to be really careful not to move the paper and not to put your hand right up on there. So if you keep going, okay, let me show you what you can do. If you, oh, there we go. I'm trying so hard not to put my hand on this iPad. My lid is breaking on me. Okay. Oh, I touched it. Did you see what happened? Okay, let me go back. Let's see if I can line it back up. That's gonna be pretty close. Not bad. There we go. Okay, So here is where I'm going to show you how you can do this a couple different ways. So you can take this and you can trace it onto your background if you want. So to transfer this image onto your background, all you'll do is take your normal sheet of paper, and anywhere you can see that you drew, you're gonna shade that background area. So I'm gonna take my pencil and I'm gonna start shading my background, the back of my paper. Now remember, if you drew on this side, you're gonna shade on this side. So you'll have to kind of hold it up to the sky and look and see where exactly you need to keep coloring. But you wanna try to get as much pencil shadings on there as you can. I'm gonna have to look up into the lights here in my kitchen, or my dining room. I might have to switch pencils here in a second. This one's gonna go dull on me. Okay, I'm gonna look again and double check myself. So what we're doing is we're laying graphite, which is what pencils are made of. We're laying that onto the back of this paper because what it will do is it'll act as like a little transfer paper that you can spend lots of money on buying, or you can just do it yourself. Okay, I think I'm gonna have to switch pencils. All right, let's see here. Okay, I'm gonna lift it up again and look and see if I'm getting all of my areas covered. I'm getting close. So I'm not quite there yet. I'm gonna go over this again and make it a little bit darker. Okay, I'm gonna lift it up and check it again and make sure I have everything covered. It looks like I'm really, really close, just right here in the middle a little bit. Okay, let me get this iPad back out here so I can kind of show you with the light. Do you see how everywhere I scribbled on the back is right underneath one of these little lines? Can you see that? All right, so you could take this and you could either transfer it onto black paper and then cut it out, or you could take this and lay it down on your background and trace it directly onto there, okay? So I'm gonna show you how we've colored on the back. We're gonna lay it over the top of our black paper. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trace over this one more time. I'm gonna push pretty hard. Okay, now let's lift it up and see. Okay, do you see? Now what you can do is transfer the image onto the black paper. So you can go back over it again with pencil to make it a little bit darker so you can see it a little easier, like that. And then when you go to cut it out, you'll end up with the same image that we just had on our other paper. You see how it gives us the guidelines to go in there and draw it again? Do you see that? Okay, so you can do that and then cut it out, or again, you can transfer it directly onto your background. And then at that point, you could use black paper and glue it down. You could, once you trace it on, you could use black tempera. You could use, probably not the watercolor, it's not gonna work, water on top of that, but you could do even acrylic over the top. But I am just gonna take, let me see here. I'm gonna take my little guy. I'm gonna line him up at the bottom because I like him standing at the bottom. Let me see what it looks like this way. Oh, I like that. I think I like that better. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put some glue on the back of him and I'm gonna glue him down. And then we're gonna be done. So the problem is I don't have a glue stick. I just have bottle glue. So I have to be really, really careful when I glue this little fella down that I don't put so much glue that when it squirts out, you have to wipe it, because when you do that, since this is watercolor, it'll wet it and it'll take off the color when you wipe it. So we're gonna be really, really careful to glue this down. Right here. I might even take my finger, since I got a lot of really small areas here, because I don't want to go overboard with the glue. So I'm going to take my finger, I'm going to kind of rub it on here and spread the glue around and get those little areas, like the little tail, get some glue on them. And I'll just wipe my table up when I'm done. This table's been through a lot with our little family. Okay, I'm gonna set him down right here. I'm gonna lay him on here, just like that. Smooth his little head out. Smooth these little legs out. And there you have it. There is project number 1. Done. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna let this go dry and we're gonna wipe up the table. All right, guys, I'll show you the dried project hopefully tomorrow.